My name is Helen Kesler. I've been living in Sarasota since 1979, but I was originally born in Tokyo, Japan, and raised in the Middle East and in North America. I think my development would have been vastly different had I not been exposed to yoga at such an early age. And so, I say to classes often, there have been many times that yoga saved my life. And I believe that it saves the lives of people every day. So yoga is one of those things that I remember when I was little and I was envious of a material possession that someone else had. And I went back to my mom and I was like, oh, I want that dress. That dress is so pretty. I wish I could have that dress. Will you buy me that dress? And I was 5, and I remember my mom turned around to me and she said, no, I won't buy you that dress. And I thought, and I got upset, and she said, I won't buy you a dress or a material possession or a thing. But if you want a piano lesson or a voice lesson or some kind of lesson, I'll buy it for you. And so what she said was that if I buy you the dress or the thing, you could lose it, break it, ruin it. It could be damaged. But if I invest in music lessons or drawing or math, then that's something you'll have in you. You can never lose. It will never diminish, and no one can ever steal it from you. So I believe in making investments in individuals that signify their ownership. So I like to invest in people, not necessarily in things, but in experiences or realizations or ideas that I can invest in the individual that no one can take away from them. That will always be there. So I guess what makes me happy is when I see that the investment has paid off. I've been gifted with a lot of miraculous moments. I feel very grateful that I've had a life filled with a lot of joy. And there's been sad times too, but just bursting with joy. I've seen a lot of the world, and Sarasota is one of my favorite places in the world. I think that here, maybe a little less so than before, but here you can live a healthy life that's not going to be exorbitantly expensive. You have an opportunity to be outdoors in nature a lot. We have a culture that supports the arts. We have a number of small subcultures. There's LGBTQ subculture, there's very much artistic undertones, there's always been health, healing, and spiritual undertones. It's not so overt in Sarasota, it's more kind of under the surface. If you go under the surface, there's all kinds of networking going on between holistic healers, spiritual healers, body workers, fitness people, psychotherapeutic types. So there's kind of a melange where all these different groups come together. So I just kind of went super spiritual and made a conscious decision to devote the rest of my adult life to spirituality. So I decided that for the rest of my life I would be an agent of change, and I would be an agent of support, and I would be an educator. I always worked as a student. Even when I was a student at New College, I had a job. I was a waitress, and I always taught exercise. So I've been schooling, educating myself, and working side by side for a long time. I started as a creative writing major. I was a poet. And when I interviewed for admission to New College my senior year, I flew down here from New Jersey with 7 manuscripts of writing. So I ended up moving to philosophy first, studied a lot with Berggren, and then I almost lost my mind. And then I ended up in international affairs with Peggy Bates. I started teaching here in 1980, so it's been a while. And the only time I took a break was when my mentor, Peggy Bates, retired as the combination provost and president. She held both positions for 3 years when the school went through a period of huge transition. And they were looking for a new president and looking for a provost, and they didn't have either for 3 years. So Peggy jumped in and did both jobs at once. And after that 3 year stint, she was pretty tired and she retired immediately after that. So as soon as she retired, I kind of withdrew from campus a little bit and spent the next few years until she passed away just completely supporting her. So I'd see her 2 or 3 times a week, until she died. And ultimately she passed away in my arms. So that was one of the greatest gifts she gave me. She's had a huge impression on me. I think she has very deeply shaped who I am. But she's also had a big impression on the community. She was one of the founders of the Women's Resource Center. She was one of the founders of the Sarasota Institute of Lifetime Learning, the SIL program. Yeah, and when she lived on campus, and once a week she'd have a open house where from like 6 to 10 you could go over to her house and she'd serve Coca-Cola and coffee and water and cookies. And you could do the jigsaw puzzle, or you could sit around the living room and have a discussion about anything, often political science in nature. And so some people would come by just to grab some cookies, and some people would come and sit, and that was an open thing to the community. It was a nice thing. She was on Sarasota University and Business Women's Board. She was integral on UNIFEM, the United Nations part of UN that is the women's group. She always had a big eye toward women, supporting women. She was very much a hardcore feminist, and and she definitely influenced my life a lot. Showed me what a strong, independent, self-sufficient woman could be. I think the best way to teach is through example, because if you're teaching just by words, then your words and your actions may not add up, and you would therefore be a hypocritical educator. So I think that rather than preaching on a soapbox, the best is to just do and be, and that usually is the best education. I think I'm just moving more and more into spiritual directions, and probably moving more and more away from materialism in the material world and more into spiritual ways of being. Right now I've just become involved in a lot of women's circling networks, and I do a lot of work with Selah Freedom, the nonprofit that rehabilitates victims of sexual trafficking. So I just left them and came here. And I just started mentoring for Selah Freedom, so I have a mentee now that I see once a week, and I just look at this whole life. This whole incarnation is dedicated to soul charity, helping people in some way and making enough money that I can pay my mortgage and put food on the table. But beyond that, it's not that important to me. Basically stuff beyond that gets recycled back into the spirituality. So yeah, I decided that the biggest point of life, or the biggest reason we're here, is to learn how to let go. As an individual, each one of us, our highest spiritual calling is to become a master of letting go. So you have to let go of the past. You have to let go of fear. You have to let go of anger. You have to let go of possessiveness of things or people or offspring or family. You have to let go of material possessions. So basically, if the only force of life that is constant is change, and the only thing we can bank on is that everything will change, then basically whatever you're holding on to and you're familiar with will one day not be in your grasp and no longer be familiar. So if everything is always changing, we better get pretty adapting, and we better learn how to let go of stuff to make room for the new.